I'm going to try to get to these notes quickly, so I'm going to suggest as you go through the 1920s American notes, if you need to pause it, write some information down on your notes page, that would certainly help. America at this point, in 1920, post-World War I era, is transitioning from that agrarian farming culture to a city culture. Now, the urban population, I mean city population, as a percentage of the overall American population, from the beginning of this country, was overwhelmingly rural, farming. That's the purple area you see right here. And it continues that way until about 1820 when the first industrialization hits, second industrial revolution hits. By 1920, over half of Americans now live in a city. And it's continued. Today it's 80%. But we are now a city or urban nation. This is New York City, a series of images. In 1876 at the top versus 2013 at the bottom. At the top, you will notice that pretty much all the land has been taken. And yet the population still grows. So by 2013, how did cities deal with it? Very simple. They couldn't grow out. They had to grow upwards. They went vertical. They made larger, taller buildings. The other issue is consumerism, this idea that Americans are no longer just spending money on things that they need, but now on things that they want. Think about your cell phone. We don't just get a simple cell phone to make calls and receive text messages. A lot of you spend extra money to get those amazing cameras. The apps, in some cases, cost a lot of money in order to maintain those special features for your social media. Those are all wants, not needs, and it really has its basis in the 1920s. So during World War I, Americans really begin to distrust foreigners. I mean, we blame Europe for World War I. And so we retreat into isolationism, that idea that the U.S. is not going to become involved in international conflicts. We don't join the League of Nations, for example. But we're also afraid of what's going on overseas. In the Soviet Union, formerly Russia, you've got communism, which has taken over. Because of that, this idea of government controlling everything, owning everything, there is no more private ownership. Well, I just told you that we're in a consumer culture. Americans are trying to buy more property, more products. The Red Scare is the result. It's this idea that we are afraid that communism is going to come here. So our government cracks down on dissent and pro-communist groups. We're also seeing nativism. Again, anti-immigrant feelings, which then come into restrictions on the number of immigrants and type of immigrants we allow into the U.S. One of the people that's going to benefit from this is President Warren Harding. He runs in 1920, basically pointing at President Wilson and saying, that guy got us into war. That guy tried to get us into the League of Nations. He wants us involved everywhere else on the planet. I want to focus on home issues. I want to do a return to normalcy and this idea of the pre-war lifestyle and economy. Now, if he had focused a little more on the home issues, maybe he would have noticed that a lot of the people that he brought into government were crooked as heck. His Secretary of the Interior at Teapot Dome sold that land to an oil company for bribes. And because of that, there is a loss of faith by many in the government and how government works, and particularly who they send up. But one thing that they never lose faith on is the purpose of America. Calvin Coolidge was asked, what is America's purpose? And he had responded, the business of America is business. The federal government promotes business and makes sure as much as possible they deregulate. They have low taxes. They want to promote that manufacturing system so that we have more factories, more jobs being produced. One unintended side effect was the farming economy is going to collapse. Previously, I talked about consumer spending. You'll notice the picture right there. We're selling cars to different groups of people now. So a lot of this is available because of credit. You borrow money from a bank. You can own something now and pay it off in installments later. It's going to benefit the banks because of interest rates, but American consumers can now buy stuff. They can have stuff. They don't have to save up for years or decades to get this. And the installment system is going to be huge. So in consumer spending, as you can see up here, the two women, and women are the target audience, are showing a sense of freedom versus, for example, this image right here. Why would a man want a car? Obviously, to attract a woman was what the advertisement is saying. It's consumer credit that allows Americans to purchase goods immediately. And because of this, some very smart business people take advantage. Henry Ford then looks at the increase of spending and realizes if he can make more cars, he can make them cheaper, and he can absolutely dominate the market. Around 1905, 1910, there are 3,000 cars in the United States. By 1923, there are a ridiculous number of cars, 15 million. By 1930, there are 23 million cars on America's roads. The most famous was the Model T, otherwise known as the Tin Lizzie. Very affordable, easily producible. Other appliances and items of interest, like telephones, refrigerators, they become popular during this time. But what's also popular is radio and movies. They become a huge entertainment focus for Americans of all economic and race levels. But one of the consequences of that is the idea of celebrity. This is Babe Ruth. He was a very famous baseball player for the New York Yankees. Try not to boo. And you will notice that celebrities now not only are famous for on the field, but they're using their celebrity in order to sell products. People like Babe Ruth, daring pilots like Amelia Earhart and Charles Lindbergh, who flew across the Atlantic Ocean alone. They become not only national heroes, but also people who are selling lots of products. So, as I previously said, the 20s are a lot of change. One of the big changes is nativism. That idea of reducing immigration, going back to the way things used to be. And a group that really gloms onto that is the Ku Klux Klan. They're going to have enormous growth during the 1920s. By 1926, you're looking at millions, possibly as many as 3 million people join the Ku Klux Klan. Some scandals bring it down. But that's one big social conflict, the idea of nativism versus accepting different groups and different peoples. There's also a religious conflict going on at the time. Now, if you take a look at the story of Adam and Eve and the creation of the world, that is called creationism, it is going to be counterbalanced with something that came out in the 19th century. A man by the name of Charles Darwin came through his book, The Descent of Man, the idea of evolution, that all life forms evolve from some earlier form. For example, humans and monkeys have a common ancestor in the past. That's pretty controversial. And so when a teacher by the name of John Scopes begins to teach this in Tennessee, he gets arrested, essentially put on trial, he's fired. And so one of the conflicts is, do we teach this concept of God, or do we teach the concept of science? That's going to be a conflict. Another issue, a social issue, is going to be the plight of African Americans. During World War I, millions of African Americans escaped the prejudice and terrible conditions of the South because there are job opportunities up north and out west. We call it the Great Migration. But they did not just bring themselves, they brought their culture and their music. That period we call the Harlem Renaissance. So it is African American cultural pride. It involves literature, music, art. Talked about this in class. If you want to take a second look at that, what is it it's saying about the experience of African Americans in the United States? That's really the question. Murals like the Negro in California history, showing African Americans as not separate history, but American history. This is all happening during the Jazz Age, yet another cultural conflict, where younger people are rebelling against traditional culture. And one of the most popular ways of rebelling, African American music, jazz. It's fast tempo music. Louis Armstrong was very famous for it. And women are now beginning to take greater power over their lives. We're seeing the passage and ratification of the 19th Amendment. They're beginning to vote. Not only that, but some women are truly rebelling. They become flappers. These are women with short skirts, short hair. They're avoiding traditional customs of women. They're smoking, they're drinking, they're going out on their own. This is a period of defiance. And of course, one of the big things that is being defied is alcohol. Get past this. This is the time where also the 18th Amendment is passed. This is at the end of the progressive era, where we think if we can get rid of alcohol, we'll improve business, we'll help families, we'll prevent poverty, we'll make America wonderful. Actually, what happens is organized crime, the mob, like Al Capone in the image here, begins to take over alcohol. You begin to see bootlegging, sneaking alcohol into the United States. Speakeasies, these secret bars people could go visit. Essentially, most Americans want to drink during this period. So what started off was to improve America actually made things worse. Not only that, but now government has to spend a ton of money enforcing this. it becomes an enormous headache, vastly unpopular, and so by 1933, the 21st Amendment is passed. Only time in history that another amendment had been rescinded. It raises taxes to help pay for this, at the time, broke government. Gentleman here is Herbert Hoover. He was a self-made millionaire. He becomes president in 1928, and he has the same philosophy as everyone else before him. We need limited government. We need to let business thrive and flourish. And as we're going to see in the next unit, it doesn't work out in his case because this is the beginning of the Great Depression. Now, the stock market crashes in October of 1929, and because of high unemployment, as much as 25% by 1932-33, you see people desperate for change, and he is going to get crushed in the polls at the end of 1932. If you have questions, I want you to come see me. Make sure you're filling out your study guide as we go throughout this unit. I want you guys to be ready. Have yourselves a wonderful day.